The old mining town of Silent Hollow had always been quiet. Too quiet, some would say. Then, one crisp autumn morning, it became eerily silent. Young Mary Beth, known for her bright smile and even brighter red coat, vanished. No note, no trace. Just an empty swing set swaying in the wind. Days turned to weeks. Search parties returned empty-handed. Hope, like the dying embers of autumn, faded. Whispers of an old legend, whispered only in hushed tones, began to surface. A legend of a skull-eating demon, a creature of shadow and hunger, awakened only by the purest fear. A legend dismissed as an old wives' tale, until now. Old man Caleb, his eyes clouded with age and wisdom, remembered the stories. Stories told around crackling fires, shadows dancing on the faces of wide-eyed children. Stories of the Skull Eater, a demon of unimaginable power imprisoned long ago in the bowels of the earth. Its hunger insatiable, its appetite the stuff of nightmares. Caleb tried to warn them. The whispers were no longer whispers. They were screams in the dark. The earth was bleeding, he said. The demon was stirring, but his pleas fell on deaf ears, dismissed as the ramblings of an old man lost to his memories. They would learn, he thought, but not before it was too late. The hunger of the Skull Eater was a patient one. It fed on their fear, growing stronger with each passing moment. Deep beneath the earth, in the heart of the abandoned mine, something stirred. A presence as ancient as time itself. The Skull Eater, its form, a grotesque parody of a man, all shadow and bone. Two hollow sockets, burning with a malevolent fire, stared out from a skull devoid of flesh. A hunger gnawed at its core, a hunger that whispered promises of blood and bone. The disappearance of Mary Beth had been a taste, a mere appetizer. The barrier that held the Skull Eater captive, weakened by years of neglect and forgotten rituals, had finally crumbled. The demon was free, and it was hungry. The town of Silent Hollow, once a haven of peace, would become its feasting ground. Sheriff Brody, a man of logic and reason, refused to believe the whispers. He dismissed the stories as hysteria, a natural reaction to the unknown. But doubt, like a persistent cough, began to creep into his mind. The evidence, or lack thereof, was unsettling. No forced entry, no signs of a struggle. It was as if Mary Beth had simply vanished into thin air. He pored over the old case files, his eyes drawn to a faded handwritten note. A legend. The Skull Eater. He scoffed, but a shiver ran down his spine. The legend spoke of a ritual, a sacrifice made under the blood moon to appease the demon's hunger. A ritual long forgotten until now. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced his heart. He was a man of logic, but some truths are best left buried. Panic spread through Silent Hollow like wildfire. Doors were bolted, windows shuttered. The once lively streets stood deserted, the silence broken only by the sound of the wind whistling through the trees. Fear, palpable and suffocating, hung heavy in the air. The townsfolk, their faces etched with terror, huddled in their homes, praying for dawn. But even the rising sun offered little comfort. The shadow of the Skull Eater, invisible yet all-seeing, stretched long and dark over their lives. They were trapped in a nightmare, their every move watched by a hungry predator. The once familiar streets had become a hunting ground, and they, the prey. Section 6. Facing the Inevitable. Sheriff Brody knew he had to act. Armed with his service revolver and a sliver of hope, he ventured into the abandoned mine. The air grew heavy, the silence thick with anticipation. The stench of death, a pungent mix of decay and something ancient, assaulted his nostrils. He descended deeper into the darkness, his flashlight cutting a feeble beam through the oppressive gloom. The mine, a gaping maw of jagged rock and forgotten dreams, seemed to close in around him. He could feel the presence of the Skull Eater, a weight on his chest, suffocating him. His heart pounded against his ribs, a drumbeat of fear in the suffocating darkness. He pressed on, driven by a desperate hope and the weight of responsibility. He was their only hope, their last line of defense against the darkness. Section 7. The Ritual. The air crackled with unseen energy. In the heart of the mine, bathed in an eerie green light, stood the Skull Eater. Its skeletal fingers caressed a pile of skulls, a macabre throne of bone. Its hollow sockets locked onto Brody, a predator sizing up its prey. The sheriff, fear threatening to overwhelm him, raised his revolver. A futile gesture, he knew, but a necessary one. "You cannot stop what has begun," the Skull Eater's voice, a rasping whisper that echoed through the chamber, sent shivers down Brody's spine. The ritual has commenced. The hunger must be sated. A low growl emanated from the creature, a sound that spoke of unimaginable power and insatiable hunger. The ground trembled beneath Brody's feet. He was outmatched, outgunned, and utterly out of his depth. But he would not yield. He would face this ancient evil, this devourer of souls, with courage and conviction. Section 8. A glimmer of hope. Extinguished. A flicker of movement in the shadows. A figure emerged, small and cloaked in darkness. Old Man Caleb. He held aloft a small, ornate box, its surface etched with strange symbols. He spoke, his voice surprisingly strong. "The hunger can be appeased, demon." His voice trembled, but his gaze remained steady. He placed the box on the ground, a peace offering to a hungry god. The Skull Eater's attention shifted to the box. A low growl rumbled in its chest, a mix of curiosity and hunger. It reached out a skeletal hand, its bony fingers closing around the box. Silence descended upon the chamber, heavy and expectant. A glimmer of hope, fragile as a spiderweb, hung in the air. Then, with a deafening crack, the Skull Eater crushed the box in its grip. The light in its eyes flared, then died, leaving only two empty sockets staring out from the darkness. Section 9. A haunting silence. The Skull Eater remained motionless, its skeletal frame frozen in place. The silence stretched, unbearable in its intensity. Then with a sigh the demon crumbled, collapsing in on itself like a house of cards. Bones scattered across the ground, the remnants of an ancient evil seemingly vanquished. The silence, once oppressive, was now welcome, a balm to frayed nerves and shattered hope. But as Brody and Caleb stumbled out of the mine, blinking in the harsh sunlight, a single thought echoed in their minds. The box, crafted by hands long gone, was meant to trap the Skull Eater, not destroy it. The hunger, they now realized, had not been vanquished. It had merely found a new vessel, a vessel much smaller, much more familiar. As they walked away from the mine, a small red coat lay discarded on the ground, its brightness a stark contrast to the darkness that lingered in their hearts. The silence, once a comfort, now pulsed with a new and terrifying truth. The nightmare was far from over. It had only just begun.